Why has Invincible remained as popular as it has been for 3 seasons when we've all got at least a minor case of superhero fatigue? It's difficult to say. I mean, it's not as if a superhero show that adds more profanity, sex, and gore than usual to attract a wider audience is that much of a rarity. Why then is this the case? Well, I had a great conversation with one of my friends, and they said that they think that this attracts people who think that Superman is too boring or too clean. Well, they don't realize that Superman stories can be very dramatic and dark and very well written. All you have to do to find out that is watch an episode of the animated Justice League series. And I think that's partially true, but I don't think that's the whole story. I think this series stands really well on its own. It feels to me like the emotional hooks of the looming threat of the Viltrumite Empire and Mark having to deal with his father's role in it are strong enough to reel in even those who would normally be really sick of the genre. Now, I don't think that this was the strongest season of the series, but I do think that it was the best at exploring ethical conflicts. My favorite part of the season by far was the emotional tension between Mark and Cecil when it came to recruiting D.A. Springfield into the GDA. This could have easily been a very black and white scenario where one was wrong and one was right, but we see that they both have valid points. Cecil truly believes that he's doing what's necessary to make the world a better place. He believes in restorative justice, and that's good. We even see from his flashback that he once felt like Mark does. And Mark is being very naive, of course, but he's not just judging Cecil for recruiting someone who kills. He's judging him for recruiting someone who he saw hurt his friend, so that was more sympathetic than it could have been. It was one of those conflicts where I wasn't on one character's side. I just wanted them to reconcile, and that's why I was really glad that there was kind of that bit of a healing moment between them in the season finale. I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone, but I found Oliver, Mark's younger brother, to be the most notable new character of the season. Now, I haven't read the comic, and I will, so I don't know where things go with him, but it strikes me as a situation where we had this really adorable kid who's just learning about right and wrong, but he could easily go down a very wrong path. Spoiler alert right now. When he kills the Mauler twins, this was actually the first time where Invincible as a show reminded me of Robert Kirkman's slightly more famous later work, The Walking Dead. That I did read the comic of, and I watched most of the series before eventually tapping out like many did. But when that series was good, there were a lot of moments when our group would meet someone and we would really want them to be able to trust them, but we as the audience kind of knew that they shouldn't. I felt like when that happens with Oliver, it was kind of similar. Like, yeah, it was kind of predictable that he would kill them, but we really didn't want him to, and they played with that. Or at least we didn't want him to kill the one who was begging for his life. And that brings up a good question of, okay, is he going to end up a villain? So that was all the things that worked well for me. Here are the things that didn't. Well, not really. Everything with Angstrom Levi. Because in the second season, I found that his motivations were actually understandable. His methods were just wrong. Like, no, he shouldn't have tried to kill Mark and threaten his family, but I certainly get why he doesn't trust him, because every other version of Mark he knew allied with Viltrum. I get it, but now he recruits all these other Invincibles who have killed innocent people to kill more innocent people just to get back at Mark for defending himself from him? How does that make any logical sense? I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing something, but for me that just took his motivations from nuanced straight down to ridiculous. But for all I know, maybe things pan out different in the comic. With that said, speaking of the comic, I am glad that it's completed, because otherwise this would seem like a story that could easily not have much of a direction. It could just go on forever. They're always being Viltrumites somewhere in the galaxy who need to be defeated, and so on and so forth. It's not like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where our heroes had to do a specific thing by a specific time to save the day, and then the story's over. So I'm glad there is that end point. However, I do know that the comic is very long, so that's going to pose a challenge for the studio to adapt all of the source material. Not as big of a challenge as Netflix has with One Piece and that live action adaptation. I don't think they're going to be able to adapt that whole series. It's just too long. But it does bring up a question of, will they be able to do it? Because as soon as I saw the comments about the deteriorating animation quality, all I could think of was, well, of course, because they're trying to cram as much of the storyline from the comics as possible into each season. But regardless of why that happened, we should be sympathetic, because animators are overworked, they're underpaid, and animation is a very involved process. After all, we got a whole scene about that in season 2 with the Comic-Con scene, which is probably my favorite moment of the entire series. I think the answer is probably that they need to hire more animators, and that would be good anyway, because a lot of animators are overworked right now. With all that said, though, before I get too off topic, those are my main opinions on the series in general and this season of Invincible. If you've read the comic and feel like it's better, worse, or about the same in any major area, feel free to let me know. With that said then, have a great one.